Well, welcome back. This is the Ignite Mic. I have a friend, Duncan DeMarsh, with me. He is a family man, a person who has been in politics since 13, and there are some amazing things happening. He's even being shipped overseas soon to help with our Army forces. So we're really glad to have him in the studio. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. The last time I saw you, I think, was in the halls of the Florida Capitol. So it's much better to be back home outside of the swamp in good old Volusia County. Thank you very much.
Amen to that. You know, I loved being in the Capitol. When you mentioned that, I didn't even think about that. But we met literally in Chase Tramont's office at the Capitol. And really, your normal office is like a block from my house.
Yes. So our representatives in the Florida legislature are basically part-time employees by definition. They work much longer. He is always, every day of the year, going around to events, reaching out to constituents. It's a full-time job. But they really are only up in Tallahassee for the 2-month, 60-day legislative session and the committee weeks that precede that session. And it is quite a swamp up there. It's a lot of lobbyists. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. It's a lot of other politicians, and it feels very remote from where we live, where we represent. So when your group came up and prayed over us and reminded us what we were fighting for, it was very powerful. I think the best thing about my employer, of many good things, is that he's a pastor, so he has to return home for his Sunday service. So we don't spend the weekends up in Tallahassee. We make the drive back. We get grounded back in the district. We go to church with our friends, with our family. And it always reminds us. It's a renewal of spirit, but it's a reminder of what we're fighting for.
Now, we're going to talk more about you, but I am honored to hear the way you speak of Tramont. You know, how has he been as your boss?
So I've known him since I first heard about him when he was a history teacher. I went to Father Lopez, the Catholic school in Daytona, and he was teaching at Spruce Creek. And my history teacher had previously taught with him. They were high school friends, actually. And she said, there's this history teacher that brings real Vietnam veterans into his classroom to teach about Vietnam. He covers the classroom in jungle ferns, and he doesn't teach the lesson. He has them teach it. She goes, you have to check this guy out. So I forget how we got connected. I think it was at a Republican meeting I met him, and he was in a run for city commission. And I was there every day that I could, after school, on the weekends, knocking on doors for him. We had a lot of teenage Republicans come out, and instantly there was a quality that I recognized was different. There's a lot of politicians who probably watch Fox News for a weekend, decide they want to be an elected official, decide the easiest route in this county is to just register as a Republican. So they learn and say what we want to hear, and that's their whole thing. Chase Tramont really believes it. It comes from the heart. He is a thinking conservative. He's compassionate towards our most vulnerable people, but he's been the best boss I've ever had. He's very knowledgeable, and there's two things that I really appreciate. I never have to worry about him taking a bad vote. He's not going to compromise his conservative values. But I also never have to worry that he'll be rude to someone. He'll speak out of turn. He'll say something that'll get him in the news. He's disciplined. He's kind. And I think he's the best person. If you're going to have to work for a politician, he would be the one to work for. So
I love hearing that. And I think that culture needs to shift. I think we're making a shift even now. We have people that are jumping into politics left and right. Yeah. Because they see that there's a need. And it reminds me of King David. You know, is there not a cause? Come on. We've got to get to that place where we want, as Christians, the things that we see as bad to change and be willing to go get uncomfortable to pursue God and allow God to lead us through that process.
I think so many people run for office because they want to be someone, not because they want to do something. I have a lot of great friends, my peers up in Tallahassee. You know, a lot of them have noble ambitions. They're conservative, they believe in the cause, they want to help people, but it is a stepping stone to further to other roles, to becoming a lobbyist, to becoming a representative in their own right. I am looked at as an anomaly because I am ideological. I actually believe that we should do the things we promised on the campaign trail. I believe that taxes should be cut dramatically. I believe we should limit spending. I think we should restore freedom. Those aren't just talking points. That's what I was raised to believe, and I want to fight for it.
So talk about your upbringing. I know that you come from, great family, it sounds like. Can you tell us about them?
So my grandfather came back from World War II. After World War II, he was driving home, and he came up with the idea to turn his father and his family farm into a drive-in movie theater. So they saved up wood despite rationing, and they built one of the first drive-in movie theaters in Pennsylvania. It's still there. We don't own it anymore, but it's in Butler, Pennsylvania. And he built a drive-in movie theater on his farm, and he eventually owned quite a lot of movie theaters. He got out of that business, retired to Florida, and my father and my uncle were at Stetson University in my hometown of DeLand, Florida, and they decided, okay, we're going to get into the business as well. So they started owning and operating a variety of movie theaters, and that's all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to pop popcorn, I wanted to make people happy, and it really is, it's a joyous thing. My dad looks out at the window of his office every day and sees couples on a first date. He sees grandchildren taking their kid or their grandkids to a movie. He just sees happy people. My line of work, you get a lot of angry phone calls. And that's all I wanted to do. But there was one moment that kind of changed the course of my life, and it was very particular. We had worked for many years. They had opened a variety of movie theaters, but they were building our flagship location in Deltona, the neighboring town to my hometown of DeLand. And they had worked for years. And this was really the culmination of all that they had worked for. It was going to be our home office. The corporate office was going to be upstairs. It was amazing. And instead of taking 2 or 3 years like it normally does to open up a movie theater, it had already taken 10 because of roadblocks from local government, because of these tax and spend politicians who want to regulate your lives away. It was very difficult. So we worked through this, and finally it was set to be the ribbon cutting. The local news was there. There was TV reporters. There was print journalists. They were all there, and there was a ribbon on the outside of the movie theater. My grandfather, who had passed away soon after, my paternal grandfather was there, my uncle, my father who had started it, the whole family having a little powwow before we cut the ribbon. TV cameras are rolling, and before we could go up and do it, politicians walked up in front of us, city managers, bureaucrats, cut the ribbon, and they were who was featured on the local news. They had stymied everything we had done for 10 years, preventing this from happening, but they took the credit. I didn't know my political philosophy at that point. I'd never read Milton Friedman or any of these conservative thinkers. But at that moment, I became a conservative at heart. I didn't know what conservative was. I didn't know that's what I was. Mm-hmm. But I knew I didn't want that to happen to anybody else. So I started attending local government meetings to stand up and fight against this. I'm 12 years old. I was frustrated. And I start to see that the only people talking up and standing up for taxpayers, for entrepreneurs, for traditional values that we believe in were Republicans. Mm-hmm. So I said, if they're the only ones fighting, that's what I want to be. And I dove in head first, and I've been involved just about at every meeting ever since. So
I love that you were involved at 12 years old, that you decided that this is something that needs to be done. I see a cause. It reminds me of David. Now, were you saved at that time?
I was baptized, but marginally. It wasn't a firm belief. It was passed down to me. But I think so. At first, when I got involved, it was self-defense. I didn't like that they were doing this to me. I was maybe a little angry. I was upset. I was self-defense. Through the progression of my beliefs, with the adoption of my Christian faith, came more than just, okay, I want to protect myself or my family from this. The Gospel of Luke says, to whom much is given, much will be required.
Amen.
I think now that I'm not fighting out of self-defense. I'm fighting because I have been given so much, because I have a Christian duty to save this country. So it's much more than that. So I think that was a part of the progression towards that. But I think it's developed into a much, much stronger belief.
It's no doubt that I am a Republican. Mm-hmm. It's open. I'll be honest about it. This show is not necessarily Republican, Democrat, or Christian or non-Christian. It's who is this person in our community and how can we get to know them? And maybe that goes to a national level, but you are already at a state level. You're being active, you've been engaged, but for 13 years it took you to get to that place where you have an influence in politics. You were talking about how we met in the halls and in the lobbyists. People don't understand that at all. I was there. Mm-hmm. I got to see some of the lobbying happening where people are paid to come into that arena, basically offices, and knock on doors and try to get time with somebody to handshake and smooze basically their idea or agenda into somebody's ear.
So the First Amendment guarantees that we have a right in this country, a right to redress our grievances.
Yeah.
That is now constituted in itself, and we do have a right to approach our representatives in government, to try and get them to do what we want, to argue for our viewpoint. That is enshrined in the Constitution. People should have the right to do that. The problem, and not every lobbyist is, and not the majority of lobbyists are bad. The problem is there are different types, and there are industry groups out there that Representative Tramont or I have never encountered. We don't know the specifics of what they believe in, what they're advocating for, what the regulatory burdens they're facing. So when they have their representative come up and inform us, hey, here's some obscure state statute that's making it incredibly difficult for us to make a living or to operate our business, that's a very helpful form of lobbying. And we never would have known, and the problem never would have been solved if they hadn't approached us. So that's very beneficial. And those people are providing, I think, a legitimate public service. But there is a presumption out there, and the term lobbyist kind of has a dirty word in a lot of everyday people's mind. And a lot of that comes from the fact that if you do roam those halls, you see a large group of people who live off of state government. Their whole existence is that session, and they use it to completely change the course of power. Term limits in Florida have been a blessing. You can serve a maximum of 8 years of in the Florida House of Representatives, 4 2-year terms, or 8 years in the Florida Senate, 2 4-year terms. That means that we have rotation in office. That's a Jeffersonian principle. It's a very good thing in my mind. One of the things that has made Florida great. But the people who are always there, who spend 60 years around that Capitol, who now have the power, is that core group of lobbyists who don't leave. There's no term limit on them. Many of them are former legislators, former state government employees. They're subject matter experts, and they're not bad people. But when the legislature lose power, when the elected officials lose power, and the people controlling the checkbooks that are necessary to get elected are the lobbyists, it's an interesting dynamic. So it's not inherently bad. I think they have a right to do what they're doing, enshrined in the First Amendment, but it's something you need to be aware of.
It's interesting because I didn't understand what a true lobbyist did. And then we've met lobbyists because there's Christian lobbyists out there. So we were there to pray for people. And one of the lobbyists who's there, his name is slipping my mind. You probably know him. He is very active in on the floor trying to make sure that we safeguard against bad legislation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's really even almost more important than maybe a change that needs to happen, because there are so many things trying to get pushed through that it almost seems impossible for you guys to read it all.
Well, and that's a very good point. Florida Family Policy Coalition, which you were up there, now Florida Family Voice, has a full-time lobbyist who's a great friend of mine, Aaron DePietro. He's advocating for families and for the pro-life movement. He's a lobbyist. That doesn't mean he's immoral. He's doing a great service. So being a lobbyist per se is not a bad thing. It's just, what are you lobbying for? What's your methodology? And there is a steep learning curve. A political science degree is not applicable to serving in state government as an elected official. I don't think there's any formal education that equips you for how much of a generalist you really have to be.
Yeah.
The state government touches just about every aspect of our life. And the idea that you would be a subject matter expert on all of those fields is just impossible. So you have to have people come in, experts come, and give you quick bullet points on what the issue is. The key is you don't have to be an expert on anything. The key is to have wisdom, to discern, are they telling me the truth? You have 50-50 issues, where no matter what you do, it's an anger, one side or the other. 50% are going to be upset. And you have to have the moral fortitude to make that decision, to be honest and be upright and be truthful. But it really comes down to wisdom to discern what is the right thing.
You made a great point about it's 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
We have, I've gotten involved with TPUSA, Faith, and some other organizations, and trying to be active in engaging the culture and like Charlie, start a dialogue, because when we stop talking,
Absolutely.
we start shooting, right? And we can't have that in our country. Our country is founded on principle to protect us from that point and civil war and things like that. We don't want those kind of things ever again. Republicans believe in the Second Amendment against our government, right? To protection against our government. We don't want to protect ourselves against each other. And one of the things that Seth Tweedale would have said is, what is the biggest problem in America? He put it on a big sign. I went out and I did that. And I started to engage people in a conversation. What is the biggest problem in America? And I have to say, if I had the opinion, it's disunity. It's resistance to truth as well. Because there has to be an absolute truth, or there is no truth. And so when we come with an attitude like, I'm going to hate Trump regardless what he does, then we come in an attitude of like, I already know, I have no open mind to the idea that there is something else out there. I'm the first to say, I don't agree with everything that Trump did. And I think even Trump would admit he doesn't do and say everything he should have said the right way. But his change, and you talked about it on my wife's show, with the getting shot, has really changed some of his mindset on how he approaches things. I think he's become more diplomatic. I think he's been gentler since, and really reverent towards God. And if we don't have God back in our country, even if you don't love Jesus and you maybe want to be LGBTQ, you have a much better chance having a good life under moral leadership than somebody who just doesn't care about anything about leaders or about what is right or wrong. They just lie and get what they want, and they're building their own kingdom. If you have somebody like you who's there for the purpose and a reason, we tend to, we'll have a better life even for those who don't deserve it even, because there's a moral standard. We're protecting all people rather than just trying to back up one side or the other. And so that disunity that we have, how do you find that we can maybe tie the gap, let the sides, obviously we can't separate ourselves from our moral convictions, but how do you find that we're going to be able to just change that course of like disunity? Like, how can we bring our country back together?
Well, it was our first Republican president, not to be partisan, Abraham Lincoln, who quoted scripture when he said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." I do believe that we are very divided. I can't condone. I'm opposed to my core the political violence against Charlie Kirk, against the Democrat elected officials in Minnesota. I do not think violence is the solution. I think it's abhorrent, and I think we should prosecute to the fullest extent of the law anyone who engages in it or even threatens it. I do think it is very bad news for our republic, for a Republican form, small r Republican form of government, that we're seeing this political violence. I hear a lot of calls from people that we need to unify, that unity is the answer. I am sometimes skeptical of that. After this recent election, Republicans, for the first time in many years, won the popular vote. And so many people were talking about that in our meetings. We won the popular vote. I am also skeptical of popularity. I'm a fan of doing what's right. And I think Americans at their best throughout history are remembered for doing what's right, even when it wasn't popular. I think of John Adams, whose cousin was Sam Adams, was the number one organizer for the Sons of Liberty. They were tar and feathering, tax collectors and redcoats. And the Boston Massacre occurs. And those British soldiers, guilty as they were, could not find legal representation in Boston. So John Adams, the patriot himself, went and served as their lawyer and gave them an adequate defense. That was probably the least popular thing he could have done in his lifetime. But he viewed it upon his death as his most courageous and notable act. So I don't believe in unity for unity's sake. I don't believe in doing things just because they're popular. I want to do the right thing, and I want to be kind and charitable when people realize it is the right thing. I don't want to be hard to them in hindsight, but I want to do the right thing regardless of the levels of popularity surrounding the issue. And I want to be recognized as someone who wasn't afraid to stand up to the Democrats or even my Republican colleagues. I think standing on principle, no matter if you stand alone, is what will save America.
It's a really good point. You said unity for unity's sake. And I think unity, in my opinion, at the church level, because we'll talk about your faith possibly in a little bit, but for the church, in my opinion, we talk about we must be unified in vision. We have to, how can two walk together unless they agree? Well, why is it that we have to agree on everything to still walk together? And where is it that we can say we're America first? Or is it that there's an enemy that we're protecting against, and we have to expose that enemy, and we need to say this is not right, and we've got to change the mind of the other side?
I think there are fundamental values of the utmost importance that a society has a hard time operating on, that a society has a hard time existing if the common man does not agree on what is right and what is wrong. We have this idea now that there are subjective values, that a child's life doesn't matter inside the womb because of the origins of his or her conception, that violence is okay if they use hate speech or something of the like. It's hard to see how we survive as a republic, as a society, if we have people in our midst who just don't believe in truth. And so I think it's for your congregation, for any organization, it's important to set the framework. What do we believe? And to strive towards that. No one's going to be perfect right from the beginning. There's going to be people who lapse in judgment, but we can bring them around in a forgiving fashion, and we can build back that consensus that is very important.
Do you think that somebody who would honestly tell, I made the failure, even in politics or wherever, this was my mistake, own it, and say, forgive me, and I want to do better, do you feel like that will work in politics today?
It's hard to do because it is a competitive environment. The very nature of our republic, we elect representatives through a competitive electoral system. Someone is likely always to be running against you. Someone's always wanting to replace you. As vice chair of the Volusia County Republican Party, I get calls every day from people wanting to seek this political office or that one. There is no shortage of people seeking to run for political office. So if you make a mistake, it's likely someone is wanting to exploit that to take advantage of you. I do not think that should mean, that environment should mean that we can't give a little forgiveness to our elected officials. Every session, there's around 1,500 votes that our state representatives will have to cast. The likelihood that they will be perfect on all 1,500 of those votes it's not likely. They're going to make a mistake. We should be forgiven for those mistakes. We should be forgiving to our representatives, and we should understand that they're human beings sacrificing a valuable amount of their time to go up there and represent us and fight for something they believe in. So I don't demand perfection, but I want them to do their best. I want them to be morally strong. I want them to use their wisdom. And if they come to me and they say, I made a bad vote and I'm sorry, I'll tolerate that mistake and I'll work towards a better solution.
I think that honesty is, even from our pastors and leaders, that you're supposed to have moral excellence. When we see humility, I feel like it wins people to your argument more than if you were stiff-necked and stubborn. It's hard to say I was wrong, first off, as a man.
Absolutely.
And two, I think that there's this feeling that if I confess that I was wrong, they'll see me as weak. And Jesus, I think, was the definition of humble, but he never failed us, right?
Absolutely.
He did everything perfect. So it was hard for us to see an example from him in humility in this way. Like how could he admit wrong? But even, then if we are right, how do we be humble enough to still hear the other side, still be a voice of truth to somebody who may be aggravated or angry? And I'm sure you get angry phone calls
every day, hundreds.
Oh, man. So your poise to do that has to come from somewhere. And I don't know if you've found it in God per se to have that strength, or what gave you the backbone to be able to stand in this arena that you're getting it from all sides.
When I get angry phone calls, it can be startling because sometimes you do not know what they're concerned about. It can be 20 minutes of expletives, of screaming and yelling before you get to what their issue is. But you have to remember, and I think you have to remember in every encounter we have throughout our lives, that all of these individuals, all of our constituents when you're working for the state, all of the people you encounter at Publix, at the supermarket, we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And it's a fundamentally conservative belief to believe that every individual, every one of our neighbors, and all our fellow citizens deserve the utmost respect, especially from their government. It doesn't matter if they have a negative tax balance. It doesn't matter if they've never voted. It doesn't matter if they're the most vocal supporter of your opponent. They are deserving of the utmost courtesy. We should roll out the red carpet to them. We should treat them with respect. That's kind of a business ethic. In my parents' business, if you don't treat your customers right, you're not going to get them back. I think we should take a little bit of that to politics and say, these are our customers. We're in the constituent service industry, just like how we have customer service industry. We should treat them with the inherent dignity and respect that they deserve. It doesn't matter if they're upset with us. We're going to use that phone call to earn their trust, to help them if they have a concern, to help them navigate our state government, and hopefully, in the long run, win their vote in the next election.
Amen to that, my friend.
That's the goal.
I want so badly for people to see God's goodness. And I think the moral excellence that the Conservative Party is aiming for is what's ideal. But in the same regard, your demeanor on what you just said is what's going to win them.
I think so.
I think it's so hard. And I'm a passionate man. I will tell you how it is. I think sometimes blunt is better than going around the bush. In fact, I'd rather somebody just tell me it bluntly than to kind of like pat me on the back and let me go about my way. So that's difficult for me to be as poised as you are with some people. Your patience becomes thin when you've said it over and over.
Absolutely.
And they should have known at that point.
It can be difficult, and it can test your patience. And I err all the time. I make mistakes. I miss phone calls, or it's the 40th person to call you in that day, and it wears you down. But they do deserve our respect, especially from their government, especially from their state government. So we should work to provide them with that. I love that. And switching gears a little bit, we're talking a lot of politics. I mean, let's talk a little bit about your personal life, if I can. You're getting married soon. Yes, yeah. And about on Veterans Day, I don't know when this will air, but 11/11 in the DeLand Historic Courthouse, I'll be married. Yeah, very, very excited. Now, you're not invited, okay, if you're watching this episode, because it's a very private event, from what I hear. Just our parents, and then a very good parson will come in, who also, Reverend Chase Tramont, also our state representative, my employer, will be officiating. So we brought in a ringer. I think he'll do a great job. Yeah, I think so. And a little plug to him and his church. What church is he at? He's at Ocean Way Church in New Smyrna. Yep. So we're very thankful for him. Yeah, great guy. I hope to have him on the show one of these days. I know. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm working with your new replacement, and you are leaving your position for temporary. Tell us about that. Yeah. So I attended college on an Army ROTC scholarship, and the day after I graduated, I commissioned in the Florida Army National Guard. I'm a first lieutenant. I'm a field artillery officer. And so I serve in a weekend warrior part-time capacity as an officer in the Army. with the Florida Army National Guard, and I do traditionally 1 weekend a month and an annual training during the summer, 2 or 3 weeks. I will deploy to the Middle East in December, which is obviously, tough for my work life and for getting married just roughly 2 weeks before that. It's not the ideal situation, and I probably could have gotten out of it. I have a government job. I could have said I'm an essential state employee, but the truth is, how could I live with myself after doing all these years of training and the excellent soldiers that I serve with, them going over there, them spending a year away from their families, them going to a foreign land, advocating for American interests, fighting over there. How could I let them go without me? So I will do my duty. It will be tough, far tougher on Savannah, my fiancée, soon-to-be wife, than it will be on me. But we've always believed that the mission really does come first. And on a personal note, I think if we can survive, which we will, if we survive this in the first year of our marriage, then everything else should be a lot easier. So she is an incredibly strong woman. I went to high school with her. It took me about 10 years to convince her to marry me. But we are honored to be entering into that, what I believe is a covenant. And I'm going to spend a year advocating, serving my country with my flag on my arm. And I'm going to come home and I'm going to be the best husband I possibly can be. So,
amen to that, my friend. And now you're going into active duty. So we'll be praying that your safety of your troops, is there high risk in this situation?
It's in the Middle East, so there's always a risk factor, but the American military never fights a fair fight. We always come in with overwhelmingly the advantage. We have the strongest men and women that I've ever seen. They are agile, and I have a lot of respect for active duty, the people who are in active duty armed forces, the Army, any soldiers, sailors, Marines. I really respect them all. But I think it takes a unique individual to serve in the Florida Army National Guard. Because unlike other states, we have hurricanes every year. Some of these individuals served 90 days on hurricane orders last year. They get called up every month. They go to the southern border to deal with different things. They're always called up. So they're juggling their family life, their work life, and their role as a military officer or NCO or soldier. It's very difficult. And it takes a person who is often not recognized, who's really dedicated to their country and helping others to do so effectively.
Beautifully said. And now, did your wife or future wife know that you were about to leave when she said yes, or was this? How'd that work out?
She was aware. So she's it definitely isn't ideal for us, but she's aware. She's known me for quite a long time, and she knew that I'm in the Army and that this is always a possibility.
But did she know before she said yes, or was this after you had planned the wedding date and everything that you found out?
Yeah, we knew. So
you knew
this
before.
Was built in, and it's
Right.
We're doing basically an elopement, a local elopement before. We'll have a small engagement party with family and friends, and then afterwards we'll have something nicer. Absolutely.
Okay.
So give me
All
some
right.
time to save up. So,
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Well, while you're in active duty, you can't spend. Well, hopefully you don't spend too much money while you're in.
Yeah,
another
that's the
country.
goal. I'm a fiscal conservative. We're taking some Dave Ramsey classes right now as a couple, so we'll come out stronger than ever. Yeah.
If I had done everything that Dave Ramsey had told me from before, my problem was I was already too late in the game. If I had done all those things early on, I could not tell you. If you are not in a stewardship class of some sort, there's a couple different ones. You need to, as an 18-year-old, and make yourself very much strict on those things, like budgeting and saving and putting yourself in a projected future rather than live for today.
Well, I'm planning on buying some subscriptions to Dave Ramsey for some of our local politicians. I think they could really use some fiscal conservatism in their lives. Yeah.
I am one that knows to do good, but sometimes you don't have an option. This place was a burden on our heart to do, and we went out and we put ourselves outstanding in debt to create it. And if I could go back, I wouldn't do it differently because I felt like I followed God into it. In fact, God's encouraged me. But if I could go back and tell anybody from the get-go, don't take on debt you can't afford. Consistently work yourself to a place where you have excess and that you're planning for the future, not trying to pay for what you haven't got. You know what I mean? Or something, or when you don't have the money, that you go and you ask for something that you shouldn't. And that's a hard place to be, because sometimes by the time you figure it out, it's already too late. You've already overextended yourself, and then you're in that trap system. And I think that's why the Bible warns us that you're a slave to the lender. And so, not that all debt is bad, because I believe that even Jesus tells a parable about giving talents to men. And so he is loaning to someone something. So I don't think all debt is bad. It's what you do with the debt and how you're building and what you're building it for. If you're doing it out of greed, anything done out of greed is going to end up.
Well, we have really become a debtor society. And I think I think the law is a teacher. It really is. And I believe that our politicians have set a very poor example for young families out there with their reckless spending habits. And that's at all levels of government. That is at local, state, but especially federal spending habits. We see politicians in Washington, D.C., who engage in the most pernicious type of spending, and that's deficit spending. So where they're borrowing from not just my generation, but from generations of unborn Americans. They are borrowing trillions of dollars, risking those unborn Americans' liberty and prosperity and everything in between, so that they can pay for today's exorbitant spending activities, government programs. All this bloat is paid for on the backs of Americans who will never be born. And if you're looking at that as a young couple getting married, saying, why should I live by Dave Ramsey's rules? Why should I live by traditional principles, biblical principles? Look at what our politicians in Washington, D.C. do. Well, they're serving in the people's house. They're elected. They make all this money. Why shouldn't I follow their example? And so the law is a teacher, and our political leaders should be examples for the next generation. They should be George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. They are no longer in that category. Some in the state government, a lot more in local, but definitely I don't see many in Washington, D.C., who live up to the principles and the examples that our founding fathers set.
And they weren't getting paid, many of those, in that day. Now we have exorbitant salaries that some politicians get. But I do say this, or I would imagine you agree, it is very hard at the little amount that some politicians get as they're going through the getting up in the ranks of being a political leader. You're getting a very small amount of money.
Yes, you are.
In fact, not to say your wage, but I would assume yours is not a large amount of money, and we have to thank you. We should thank you much more for being able to do that. But the leaders that we truly need in this country are leaders that would do it for nothing, because that's their heart is to do it not for what they can get out of it, but how they can serve and help the people.
Well, I definitely don't deserve any thanks. Government employees and especially myself should have the view that we serve. It's an honor to serve you, that it really is service and it's worthy of the sacrifice. My employer, Representative Tramont, like every other member of the Florida House, is limited to 8 years. I believe that 8 years is like a tour of duty in state government to fight for what I believe in, and then I'll be 30 years old. I can go and pop some popcorn and open my own business, whatever I want to do, follow my family's footsteps. But I believe that this is the time to fight. If not now, then when? If not me, then who? This is the occasion. What I will say about politicians' pay, I do believe that we often hear, especially on college campuses, the only people who get elected to political office are millionaires. The only people who can serve are the rich because the pay is not accommodating. I really believe if you look at the example of our founding fathers, our political leaders don't necessarily have to be rich, but they should be individuals who are willing to make sacrifices. You see that in a lot of members of the Florida House. They are not exorbitantly wealthy, but they are willing to take the time. They definitely lose more money moving up to Tallahassee than their marginal salary is, but they're willing to take the time to serve, even if it's just for 8 years, even if it's 4 years, to fight for something they believe in. Every member of the Continental Congress who signed the Declaration of Independence signed underneath the phrase, "And to this we pledge our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor." Most people don't realize now we take for granted that we won. They were basically signing a suicide note. They would have been hung if we had lost this. They would have been hung, sacrificed their lives. Their wealth, any wealth that they had, many of them had already sacrificed it, would have been confiscated. Their children and families would have been left destitute. And the last one, their fortune. Their sacred honor. The last one, their sacred honor. The history books, to the victors go the myths and monuments. The history books would have, if they had written about them at all, what about these terrorists who initiated a bloody civil war? We revere them now, rightfully so, because they won. They risked everything, their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor. Do we have politicians now that would be willing to take that risk for what they believe in? John Adams, the night 6 or 7 nights before he had to sign that document, was up all night with a terrible fever. No medication could put him to sleep because he was so stressed out. He knew it was the right thing to do, but he was so fearful of what the consequences may be. But he put his name on that document. So we should look, when there's this individual running for city council, for state legislature, for U.S. Congress, look into their eyes. And I think in your heart you'll know, would they be willing, if they were transported back to 1776, would they have put their name on that document? And I think that's a good litmus test for who we should send to higher office.
I'm going to remember that for a long time, my friend.
Yeah, I think that would change a lot of things up there.
Yeah, that is a very good question. Somebody posed a statement to me, or I heard it through something, and it said, if you have a price and it's not death, then you have no honor. You can be bought.
Very true. And it's hard to calculate, for those with families, what that would mean, what that looks like. And we tend to be a more peaceful society, definitely more peaceful than the American Revolutionary time. So it's hard for us to contemplate exactly what kind of sacrifices have been made historically for our liberty, for our freedom, for the society, the republic we live in. So it's hard to grasp how difficult it can be, this fight we're in. But it will take sacrifices in the future, and we have to be ready to pay that price. My
wife said you're a young Charlie Kirk. I think what that statement was about Charlie Kirk and how he gave his life, and that if our cost is not our life, then we're doing it in vain, and we could be bought. And so, what politician do you have? Hearing you say, my conviction is I could have got out of having to go into active duty and the possibility of dying. But then I wouldn't be actually representing what my belief is, that we should all be willing to go and die for our country. And so,
well, I definitely think it's not a huge possibility. We have the overwhelming protection. We have great men and women by our side. It's not
where
like
you are.
It's not like I'm going to Iwo Jima or something. I'm not special forces. I'm nothing fancy.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm just a regular soldier. But I look out on those other regular soldiers I serve with, these other individuals in my unit, and I see incredible heroes, everyday heroes, who are taking off their seemingly normal lives with their families and all these different things to do something far from normal, to do something really spectacular.
I would say you're a pretty smart guy. But what I hear about your job, can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, so I'm an artillery officer. So there's different, what they call like MOSs, jobs in the Army. I'm a 13 Alpha, which is a field artillery officer. So I went, after I graduated college, I went to the field artillery school at Fort Sill, and we learned how to think a Civil War movie with the cannons that you see shooting off in the distance. It's like that, but much more high tech. It's an indirect fire weapon, so you don't aim unless something terribly wrong. You don't really aim directly at your enemy. You fire it, and you have to use calculations and math and all these different computer programs to try and get it right on the target. I enjoy it. I think it's exciting. And initially, when I joined the Army, when I was going through ROTC, I kept saying, well, I want something that would be applicable for a career. If I do logistics, then I could get a job in logistics outside. Who knows? But what I realized is, if I'm in the National Guard and I'm working a desk job every day, and if I'm going to be in the Army for a limited time, I don't expect to do this for 30 years. If I'm going to be in the Army a limited time, I want to be in the Army. I want to do combat arms. I want to blow things up. I want to, fight, learn how to be a soldier. Hopefully it never comes to that, but I want to be in the Army. I want to earn my keep. I am not the perfect soldier. I'm not a natural athlete. I'm not some kind of Green Beret or hero. But I want to serve, and it's difficult at times. It's very difficult to leave your spouse for a year, to leave your family. This election cycle, man, I have horrendous heartache that I'm going to be missing it because I think it's so important for our country. But I think our freedom requires sacrifice. I want to serve. It's something I've always done. And, I've worn the uniform for all these years, and I've never had to go before. So this is my time to put my money where my mouth is and really serve. So I'm excited.
It honors me. I look back, and I was such a delinquent before. I gave my life to Christ at like 21, so my life changed drastically. I've tried to do my best to be a good steward and a great husband. I feel inadequate in so many ways, but to go back and redo it, if I was like the perfect guy, in my mind, I would have served my country for the first 4 years out of high school. I would have done gotten engaged in my civil arena from a young age, like you did. So to see somebody who's doing it, you're an honor to be around. Your respect in a room. I can't say more about you, and I've only really gotten to know you for a couple hours here at the studio. I feel like I've gotten to know you a little bit more to get to really see your personality, but your heart to, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, and everything you speak, man, it really does say, I want to do this for the best interest of others. And keep going, man. Keep humble hearts, and we'll be praying for your protection. We'll be praying that God does something even bigger when you get back, because you're not done in politics after you get back from that.
No, I'm definitely going to, I appreciate your kind words. I'm going to come back, I think, with a renewed focus. I've been doing this now, 10 election cycles, basically, or 10 years, 13 years, nonstop, just campaigning, doing this whole political thing. There's some biblical allusions. I'm not Jesus. I'm not going to battle with the devil out there and stuff, but there's some biblical allusions to spending some time in the desert to renew your spirit. And I'm looking at this as a time I'll do my duty, but I believe it's an example to kind of recharge, to restore a lot of the energy that I've lost over these years, and to come back with a passion and save our country. So that's really my goal. It is sad to leave, obviously. Volusia County is family to me. So I really believe that I have a duty to go. So I'm going to use it as an opportunity to recharge my batteries, to learn something, and come back and fight like I've never fought before. So.
Amen. You say you're not Captain America or anything, but I saw a post on Facebook. Makes you look a lot like Captain America there with a big gun in front of that.
Oh, yeah.
What was it? What kind of helicopter?
We were at XCTC, which is called Exportable Combat Training Center. It's a program that the National Guard go to. We went to the XCTC 2 years ago. Then we went to the National Training Center, which is like a desert environment. And we were actually doing a sling load training where we were picking up our artillery pieces with helicopters. It was landed on there. I had a little bit of juice left up in my phone that had been turned off for about 2 weeks, and I had somebody take a picture. There's a BFA, which is like a muzzle cover on the gun, so I wasn't shooting live rounds. I just wanted a picture. And then I turned. My birthday almost always falls. It's in July. It almost falls on my annual training, so I usually try and take a cool Army photo and throw it up there when I get back and say thanks for the birthday wishes. Yeah.
I loved it. So if you get on his Facebook, follow him there. I am excited to see where this takes you. I'm excited to see you got the passion. I know you posted when you decided to get married, doing it. Charlie Kirk, right?
Yeah.
What does he want us all to do?
Get married, have babies. Yeah. He was a large influence upon me. I think now I'm grateful. A silver lining, and we wish he was still here, but a silver lining is that so many more people know about his mission. And an important thing that occurred, I went to his second conference. He had one, I wasn't old enough. Second conference he ever had was for high school students in Washington, D.C. And I went, and I really enjoyed it. But it was all, and I'm into this, I support free market economics. It was all free market economics. It was all Republican policy stuff. There was really no social conservatism, and there definitely wasn't any faith aspect. 2-3 years later, I think people don't talk about this enough. I really think he had a personal awakening. And we were beginning to talk about the Christian roots of our country, the importance of God in the public square, and that his awakening on that, I don't know what it was. I haven't heard him talk about it really, but his organization bringing in that was a huge influence on me, on my faith journey. And so now we remember him as a martyr, as a Christian crusader who went and popularized so many different things on faith. He wasn't that way publicly. He probably had. I don't know what his situation was, but it was all free market economics and Republican Mitt Romney-esque talking points beforehand. And he had some kind of road to Damascus moment, and it changed. And we are so blessed because of it. Because I think his life and his death and his whole mission changed so many people's lives, including mine, for the better. So people, a lot of people will go up and say, oh, you could be the next Charlie Kirk. No one will ever be the next Charlie Kirk. But if I can do 1% of what he accomplished, if we can get 1 million people doing 1% of what he did or living up, following his example, I think we could accomplish a lot. So
I agree with you. I want to be that 1%.
Yeah, I think
I would love to see us both be more like 5% or
Absolutely,
10%.
yep.
And then could you imagine the percentages if we all rose to that place where I think God is already prompting. So before Charlie Kirk had passed, we were planning on being a part of like things and getting involved, and we were invited to go to Amerifest, and we really think that the media is a huge part of what God has called us to. And that's why we're having this podcast right now, because it's values and people in our community that are going to get displayed, and I'm giving it an open platform. So, you're Republican, you're a Christian, but I'm giving this platform to anybody who will come on my podcast.
Absolutely.
And say, okay, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. I might be Republican, and I'm going to speak from my point of view, and I might be conservative, and I might be, a Christian. But what are you? What are you? And I don't think a lot of people get to know that. So you have faith. What is your background? Like, where is your faith at today?
I was baptized into the Catholic Church. I attended Catholic schools here in Volusia County, St. Peter in DeLand, and then Father Lopez Catholic High School in Daytona. Never went to public schools. I was educated in Catholic schools my whole life. I met Savannah, my now fiance. She was a year younger than me, 2 years younger than me, and at Father Lopez, it was an incredible blessing I received. And I'm not saying that just because it was a Catholic school or just because it was a private school, but any school. Right now, Representative Tramont and I have been doing a lot of research on prayer in schools. And I've written 25-page synopsis of what the policy implications can look like. And we're doing all this research. And
I have some ideas for you.
The judicial barriers that have occurred over these years that can't seem impossible to surmount, impossible to overcome from these left-wing activist groups and these left-wing judges. It's just such a blessing looking back in hindsight that I was able to go to a school where we saying God Bless America every morning, where we had the opportunity to pray, where there was actual discipline. I think our schools, our taxpayer-funded schools, have lost so much of what is important. We give people there's an A+ grade. Does that mean your child is virtuous? Does that mean their child loves freedom? Does that mean their child has a relationship with God? I mean, that's what I'm looking for.
Right. I
think reading, writing, and arithmetic is icing on that cake. It's a secondary concern to what kind of person am I raising. And I appreciated that I went to a school that at least put that first, where cultivation of virtue was a primary concern. Now, their education was excellent. I can write cursive. Most kids can't do that. I have great handwriting. I know how to tie a tie because of Catholic school. And so there's different biblical schools out there. There's classical curriculum. I would say that a large part of my formation as an individual, as a Christian, as everything, came from going to a private school.
Now, you at a Catholic church now, or? I
am. I'm at St. Peter's in DeLand on New York Avenue. I've gone there now for almost 26 years.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. So
you literally were christened there.
Different church. That's why I missed a couple months.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I was
absolutely,
like, good night. That's
yeah.
pretty much your whole life, isn't it? Okay, so if you had one thing that you were gonna say, and you said a lot already, but if there was one message you wanted to share about your faith to others, how would you persuade them? What would you ask of them?
What I would say is I fundamentally believe that Jesus Christ suffered and died on a cross, that he suffered tremendously for each and every one of us, that he rose from the dead, and through belief in him, I think we can be saved from our sins. What I would like to hear when I say that is the reaction from the ivory tower in academia or in the halls of Congress or in some of our federal government agencies who think that is somehow hate speech. They think that is lunacy coming from parts of America that they choose not to represent. I think the common man and woman, actually there are no common men, but the everyday, tremendous, tax-paying, freedom-loving, Bible-thumping Americans out there, they believe in these principles. Somehow, we need to translate to our elected officials that should be the tenet of their time in office, that they should base their service upon the principles of freedom, of faith, and what made this country great. Somehow there has gotten to be such a disconnect between the people we elect, and there's some great ones like my employer who definitely understand this, between the people we elect and the people who elect them. The everyday American out there works very hard, just wants to worship their God, raise their family, make an income, start a business, whatever it is, they want to be left alone. We need to engage and convey to our elected officials that they need to fight on these issues.
I agree. I love your motivation. You speak very well. Man, you make me think a little bit harder about some of those things that God wants to do and hasn't done yet and has motivated me to do. And I know when you said that Jesus Christ died on the cross, that we can be saved and forgiven of our sin, that is the number one thing anybody can first come to know and know him. You know, that personal relationship with God is the number one thing. And out of that, then we can change the world. And so when you talk about the idea of prayer in school, people don't know. But I saw a statistic that at the point they took prayer out of school, every criminal activity, unwed mothers with pregnancies, fathers in the home, took a huge exponential turn in society in the United States. And so it was radical to see that one thing the church didn't rise up against immediately really has led to social destruction in our country. And that's both party affiliates. I mean, that's in general terms, it destroys our moral foundation. And it has led to, and I think the person that put that statistic was trying to make that point, but I would agree with that point. Don't you?
I do. I think the law is a teacher, and I think so many elected officials vote and pass legislation, tremendously transformative legislation, that they don't understand what the unintended consequences of it might be. We look at education, how much it has changed from the original intent. Why do taxpayers pay for education? Is it a babysitting program to just keep people off the streets? Is it to do workplace skills? I think that you could ask 100 different Americans why we pay for public school and get 100 different answers. We don't really have a common consensus of what education for me or means to us. For me, it means that we should fundamentally transmit fundamental values about this nation that made this nation great to the next generation of Americans. It means we should convey a certain amount of patriotism, a skepticism of government power, a desire for lifelong learning, a faith in God, personal virtue. As conservatives, we talk a lot about limited government.
Right.
We want the power of government to be smaller. We want its power to be limited. That is only possible if we have self-governance as individuals. John Adams, I've quoted him, 4 times in this podcast. John Adams said our government is only fit for a moral and religious people. I believe that's fundamentally true. And so when you take the Bible out of schools, when you take any kind of even discussion about what is right or wrong, when you say everything should be dictated at you from some commissar or bureaucrat, that you can get everything from the government, that you don't need to be self-sufficient, that you don't need to be self-policing, that you don't need to be a good person. That should be fundamental. We should cultivate virtue in our students and the next generation. When you have none of that, then we should expect an explosion of crime and disorder and all these things. And we should expect government to grow. Mm-hmm. If we can't police ourselves, if families will not rise to the occasion and transmit these fundamental values, then government does it. And I don't like what government's going to teach our kids. Even with President Trump, he's a tremendous leader. He's a fantastic leader. We have Republicans control all these branches of the federal government. But still, the whole premise is that the family, the traditional family, should convey their values to their children, that they should regulate their children, that they should teach and transmit what makes this country great. And we've now taken that away from them from early and earlier ages and given it to government bureaucrats. And I don't think it's right.
I agree with you. And one of the things that you were saying about prayer, what if we had prayer allowed not only for our kids in school, but for the student teachers to also pray? What change would that make? Seeing somebody like, let's say my teacher wants to just pray for me to have a good test. Mm-hmm. You know, like God be with them, like in Jesus' name, you know, because they always try to say, oh, you can pray, but don't pray in Jesus' name. You can't say the name of Jesus in it. It has to be general. It has to be, no, if the LGBT community could portray and speak openly for all these years, and that's what's happened, is they silenced the Christians and they allowed the speech of others. We need to protect that first American, you know, the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment. We need to protect that to the point of, yeah, you can speak about wrong stuff. Okay. But you cannot prevent me from speaking about what's the truth. And that's the thing. Like, because I'm almost afraid to try to silence the other side in order that, you know, my kids are not exposed to that. I would much rather hear Christian men and women of God speak openly in school without risk of losing their job and other things. So I would much rather protect that than to try to hinder the other. You know what I mean?
Well, I fundamentally believe teachers and students have a right to pray in public establishments, in public schools, and government-funded institutions. We need to restore that right. There's so many things we need to change about government schools. But fundamentally, Savannah and I would like to have a family very soon. We'd like to get started. And what I'd say is we constantly grapple with the idea we're already paying taxpayer dollars into government schools, but there is no way right now we could send our kids to an institution, a taxpayer-funded public institution, where they can't worship their God, where they'd be what appears to be blatant examples of indoctrination, where everybody gets an A, where there's violence in every hallway. So we will choose to pay, if it takes, out of pocket of our I'm a government employee, small income, to send children that we hope to have to a classical Christian school. And I think that needs to be the approach and the investment that more parents take. We need to have an exodus out of public education. And when we leave, the alarm bells will go off, and we will educate our children properly while we work to fight to restore it through the legislative, through the policy area. We'll elect better conservatives to our school board. We'll do great things. But we can't, I can't live with myself if I were to send my future children to a school where they cannot freely worship, where they're taught to hate their family, hate their God, and I don't even know what kind of quality education they're getting.
And I think that's not a bad choice. I definitely think the number one choice is we need reform in our public schools.
Absolutely,
for sure.
And that is probably the fight of our time. COVID woke a lot of parents up. Their children were going home and they were listening to the speaker play from their computer while their kids were at school, and they heard things that would make our skin crawl on any parent. And they said, "What is this?" And they started going to school board meetings, and Moms for Liberty was born. And they fought, and they continue to fight courageously on these issues. But it is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the purpose of education is. And I don't see a solution coming anytime soon. So we need to fight on all fronts. We need to advance the classical curriculum that made the Western world great. We need to advance prayer in schools. We need to get a lot of this pornographic material out of the libraries. But I can't say, okay, kids, stay in this school while I wait to fix it. I think we need to take a massive exodus of Christian and conservative families, students out of the schools into our own institutions.
And I'm thankful that they allow the government money that goes to our kids to go to those institutions now. That is a good policy that just was passed.
Well, that's a tremendous
Is that only
reform.
Florida, or is that
There's several states, Arizona, West Virginia. West Virginia has the Hope Scholarship. The education savings accounts and universal school choice that we have in Florida. Put it in perspective, my parents have 3 kids, so they were sending each of us, paying their taxpayer dollars for public schools and paying out of pocket $10,000 a year to send us. That was a huge, huge sacrifice. But they looked at the situation in government schools and they said, we're going to give you a ticket to success. We're going to prioritize an education that cultivates virtue, that has discipline, just what schools used to be. But they had to pay double for it. Now we can help parents out regardless of their zip code, regardless of their income. They can choose the school of their choice. And I think that's a fundamentally good solution.
It's been a pleasure talking with you. I think we're going to wrap this thing up for this time being, but we're going to have to bring you back on when you come back.
Whenever you need me. Yeah, I'll be back. Thank you very much.
I'm excited to see what God does in the coming future. I know Julie will probably be waiting for you to get back so you can take back the spot, or are you both going to be working together?
I think when I come back, I'll get off military leave, and I think she'll have so much experience, and she'll do wonderful in that role, and we'll go back to where we were, and we're just really looking forward to it. Her stepping up is great help to everyone. I'm so thankful for her and my employer, Representative Tramont. So
yeah, he's going to be missing you. I have a feeling. So guys, this is the Ignite Mike. Really pleasure having you back. We'll be back with another great person to talk to. Come back, like, share, and of course subscribe so that you know the next episode's coming out. God bless you guys, and thank you.